2017. Carmen, the roll, please.
Here.
Klepper. Here. Stewart Gulyas. Here. Aquila.
Here. We have minutes to approve for June 22nd, 2017.
Move approval of our minutes.
Second.
I second that.
Any additions and or corrections? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Reports, resolutions, and communications. Anything?
Thank you. I think just a couple of small notes. So we are furiously working on the 2018 calendar. We hope to finish that up here in the next couple of weeks and present that to the Plan Commission at the November meeting. So we'll be able to show you also then at the November meeting what we're looking at for meeting dates for 2018. Beyond that, I would just say please bear with us tonight as half our staff is at a statewide planning conference and we're filling in for them. So thank you for your patience.
Wait, this is the A team, I thought.
That is true, yes.
All right, I'm not going to go through the list of petitions because we have many and that would take too long. So we'll start with our first one, UV-18-17, City of Bloomington Parks and Rec. Staff report, please.
I will be presenting the first two cases kind of together since they are intricately involved. So this will be a hearing for the use variance for 1817 as well as a conditional use in the variance 26-17, both for the City of Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department. And these are all related to the redevelopment of the McDowell Switchyard for the proposed city park that will be located on this site. So the overall site runs from Grimes Street to the north, all the way south down to Country Club, Rogers Street to the west, and Walnut Street to the east. The overall site is approximately 60 acres in size, and the petitioners have been working for the past year or two on a master plan for the redevelopment of this Switchyard Park that will encompass a wide range of features and amenities that are a little bit atypical of what you would find at a city park. This is more than just swings and slides. There will be a lot of features on this site, a pavilion, a seating area, skate parks, a lot of different features. So this site, as you may or may not be aware, has a history of different uses on there that have had a lot of environmental impacts. So the petitioner is balancing both the reuse of the property as well as some of the environmental cleanup and mediation that needs to happen on this site. With all of the adjacent street frontages that surround this property, the petitioner has located the parking areas and access points relative to those adjacent street frontages, which allows them to free up the inside of the site for all of the features and amenities. The petitioner did go through a floodplain analysis study of this property. It took about 1.5 years to get completed, and that accomplished a more detailed analysis of the floodplain and the floodway and floodway fringe boundaries that span throughout this property. So once that letter of map revision was accomplished for the floodplain, they set out with designing the overall site itself. And as I mentioned, they've located the parking areas on the periphery and all of the elements of the design features on the center portion of the property. So the petitioners are here tonight to request a package of variances. They are requesting a use variance in order to allow for a parking area in the floodway. They are requesting a conditional use approval in order to allow for parking in the floodway fringe. They are requesting a variance from the environmental standards in order to allow for disturbance of some of the portions of the site that are encompassed with steep slopes. These are portions of the site that have more than an 18% slope. They're requesting a variance from the riparian buffer standards in order to allow for a parking area on the west side of the site, as well as a variance from another section of the riparian buffer standards or the environmental standards that deal with wetlands. This is in order to allow for a portion of an existing wetland to be filled while at the same time allowing for an additional area of wetland mitigation to occur, including the daylighting of a portion of the west branch of Clear Creek that runs through this site. They are also requesting a variance from the entrance and drive standards for a proposed drive on the west side of the site. So I'll just kind of briefly step through some of these variances so that you can get an idea of what is involved with each one of them. And I'll start on the west side of the site for the entrance and drive standards variance. The Unified Development Ordinance does not allow drive cuts to be wider than 34 feet. The petitioners are proposing a more elaborate design for the entrance on Rogers Street that would encompass a median boulevard in the center of it. That median boulevard would allow it to be landscaped as well as kind of separate the entrance and the exit lanes. So as a result of this incorporation of a boulevard entrance, the overall width of the driveway is wider than the 34 feet. It's approximately 60 feet in width. This is a unique design element that the petitioners really feel helps set this park aside and this entrance aside and is a very key component to the site as a whole. The Unified Development Ordinance was designed with the development of individual properties, most of the time with commercial or multifamily uses. This particular property, with the redesign of it or the redevelopment of it as a city park, has a lot of problems meeting some of the standards of the Unified Development Ordinance, especially when you try to have a more defined entrance and driveway as the petitioners are seeking with this. So we have been working with them to address pedestrian safety. One of the reasons for the maximum width of a 34-foot is to minimize pedestrian safety or to maximize pedestrian safety as they cross those drives. So the incorporation of the boulevard provides a pedestrian refuge as sorts to help give them a space so that they are not having to cross the entire 60 feet in one run. It provides a safety barrier for them and a place for them to cross safely. So we've been working with the petitioners in order to come up with the best, most safe design for this boulevard entrance while still accomplishing the goals of the UDO and providing pedestrian safety for the users of the park. The other two variances, or two of the other variances, are related to the riparian buffer. These are on the west side of the site, again, just adjacent to the parking area, and this is along the west branch of Clear Creek. So the Unified Development Ordinance does not allow disturbance within 75 feet of the top of bank of both sides of a stream. So the exhibit that you can see on screen that was also included in the packet lays out those three graduated buffer distances that total 75 feet. So there is a portion of the parking lot that is being requested to be shown in that riparian buffer. All of the parking areas on the site, not just the portions of the parking in the riparian buffer or the portions in the floodplain, but all of the parking on the site will be finished with permeable pavers. This was something not only that came from staff, but also something that was important to the Parks Department to help set kind of an ideal scenario of how we would like parking lots to be designed to maximize water infiltration, minimize impervious surface coverage. So all of the parking areas, parking driveways and aisles and stalls throughout the site will be finished with permeable pavers. One of the other variances they're requesting, as I mentioned, from the riparian buffer standards for the wetland disturbance. This is just adjacent to the parking area, and this is to allow for a portion of that area to be filled in. This particular area that is being requested for the wetland disturbance has a history of some flooding, mostly as a result of beavers that have been in this area that have dammed up the culvert that runs underneath the Beeline Trail that runs into Clear Creek. So it's been an ongoing area of cleanup and remediation over the past several years. So the petitioners will be placing a small amount of fill in that area to allow for a trail to go through there, and as a result of that, through state and federal requirements, they must remediate that disturbance area. So they will be remediating that just to the east of this, where they will be daylighting a section of the west branch of Clear Creek, where it is currently contained within a culvert. So that is certainly a very good environmental trade-off there of opening up a creek that is in a culvert so that it can be exposed to fresh air and daylight and accomplish all of the things that creeks are meant to establish. So they will be daylighting that creek there. and that is as a result of our zoning code riparian buffer standards. They would not be allowed to disturb that creek bed in the culvert area, so that is being folded into the riparian buffer variance in order to allow for the creek to be daylighted. Going on to the parking, on the north side of the site, as I mentioned, two of the variances, the use variance and the conditional use request, are related to the parking that is in the floodway and the floodway fringe. This is on the north side of the site, adjacent to Grimes. This portion of the property is very narrow in width, and so the petitioners have tried to locate, or not tried, but did locate all of the physical improvements, the basketball courts, the fences and other features outside of the floodway. And the only thing that is being requested in the floodway is a parking area. As I mentioned previously, this is constructed solely of permeable pavers, and the area that is being used for parking is currently being used as parking now. It is the disturbed site. There is no riparian buffer currently there. It's gravel, essentially. So with this petition, we, the petitioners, the city, will be greatly improving the stormwater runoff in this area as a result of this. The stormwater runoff currently just drains, sheet flows off of the site into the creek with no sort of stormwater measures whatsoever. So this petition will allow for all of the stormwater that hits this site to be collected in stormwater inlets and rain gardens that are along this section that will drain to one stormwater quality detention pond that will provide improvements for all of the drainage on this site as well. They will also be installing landscaping as required along the east side of the parking lot, so there will be great improvements to the site as a whole as a result of this. The conditional use approval is to allow parking in the floodway fringe, and the UDO sets this out as a conditional use with the stipulation that the parking be constructed solely of permeable pavers, which I mentioned they are meeting that aspect of it. One of the other variances that is being requested that I'll just briefly touch on with the discussion of the parking lot is the maximum number of parking spaces allowed. For the park, for a park, the UDO defines the amount of parking spaces allowed as 5 spaces per acre. So based on that, the park would be allowed 292 parking spaces. And as I mentioned, this park is being designed to accomplish a wide range of features and provide a lot of amenities not typically associated with a typical park. So while the petitioners and staff have certainly noticed a high need for parking at some of the parks just based on the passive uses that are there with some of the more active uses that are on this site, the large events that are being planned for this site, it was very important to provide parking on this site as there really isn't any on-street parking that can be utilized to absorb any overflow, and we certainly didn't want high events to cause spillover parking in any of the adjacent neighborhoods. So the petitioners are requesting to allow for 386 parking spaces in order to serve the site, and they firmly believe that that is necessary, as well as they will probably still be shuttling people during high activity events, but the number of the 386 is what we feel is the most appropriate number for the site and the expected uses that will occur on this property. The other variance that is being requested is from the parking setback, and this is over on the west side of the site on Rogers Street. The UDO requires parking spaces to be 20 feet behind the front of the building. As I mentioned previously, the UDO, the application of the UDO standards to a city park, oftentimes you're just going to find things that don't exactly coincide. City parks don't oftentimes usually have buildings behind which you're going to have a 25-foot setback requirement. Parks oftentimes just has features like playgrounds and slides and swings, and so there's not a defined building to measure a parking setback from. There is a building over on Rogers Street that will be preserved with this petition. It is an existing industrial building that will be preserved on the site. However, some of the proposed parking will be located in front of that building, and the petitioners have located all of the parking on the property in order to meet the front parking setback first, trying to avoid all areas of the floodplain and riparian buffer. So there is a portion of the front stalls along the Rogers Street frontage that do extend into the 20-foot setback. That would be measured from the only building that is remaining on the Rogers Street frontage. So that was the last variance that was being requested. So as I mentioned, the UDO, the application of the UDO standards do present some practical difficulty with the use of the property, in that the UDO was not initially designed to be applicable for a city park. The site has a history of a lot of environmental remediation that needs to occur, as well as a lot of unique features through the site that do require some variances in order to allow for its redevelopment. The growth policies plan certainly encourage the redevelopment of the McDowell Switchyard for a community park, and the redevelopment of this will benefit not only the citizens of Bloomington, but also the surrounding communities as a whole. It is a very unique amenity for the city that the administration and the citizens would greatly benefit from. So with that, we are recommending approval of the variances, both the use variance and the conditional use, and the development standards variances that are being requested, with the conditions listed in staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Before we go any further, I should have paid closer attention to the order of items on the agenda. Since I am a Parks Board member and effectively a petitioner, I'm going to recuse myself from any further discussion of this case.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Can you please state your name?
Good evening. I'm Paula McDevitt. I'm the director of the Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department. And
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. You have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity to give a voice to this project that the Parks Department has been pursuing and working on, really dating back well over 10 years. We worked on the master plan in 2012 with a lot of community input and focus groups, and really listening to what our citizens wanted to see in a park this size. I cannot emphasize enough the landmark opportunity that we have to develop a site this large. We are very fortunate in this community to have a lot of parks, and a lot of people visit our parks and use our parks. We're very well supported, and we are excited about the opportunity to create and design a landmark and what we are calling a true destination park for everyone. As some of these slides present, we are taking every inch of this park to create a variety of opportunities for people. There will be opportunities for passive recreation, for social gatherings, for groups to have meetings, for people to walk, to be physically active, to sit and just enjoy the outdoors. As well as all the open green space, we are planning very critical buildings and structures in the park, a year-round pavilion that will be open and large enough for large festivals and gathering for both public and private use, a performance stage, large gathering lawns, a variety of courts for physical activity, and open spaces. There's dog park, skate park, so really something for everyone, and that is our emphasis with this park, is that we want people in it and using it and having a presence every day in the park. So with that, I just welcome the opportunity to discuss these issues. As I can emphasize enough, this has been a landmark project for the department for the past 10 years, and as we continue with the planning and the build out, and then the day when we cut the ribbon and welcome the community is the page that we are on. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions for staff and/or petitioner by the board? Barry?
Sure. Staff, are there any improvements currently planned along Rogers, since that is going to be such a major entrance exit from the park, and with so much of the parking being concentrated on the west side?
Absolutely. There will certainly be installing street trees along there as necessary or as required, as well as landscaping and a public sidewalk along that frontage as well. We're continuing to work with them on some of the specifics of the sidewalk along there. There's a portion where the creek, the west branch of Clear Creek, cuts underneath Rogers Street that we're still trying to work out the specifics of the design of that. But yes, they will be installing street trees and sidewalk along that frontage, as well as landscaping.
Okay, and any stop signs, any other changes would come in time, sort of as
Yeah,
everything's built out?
they are continuing to look at any pedestrian crossings that might be necessary along there, whether it's painted crosswalks or
Okay.
lighted beacons in order to facilitate that. But that's still something that we're working on, yes.
Okay, okay. And could you talk a little bit more about how the parking number was arrived at? Because it's approximately 25% over what would be allowed by code. And if you could just talk a little bit about that process and how you were able to analyze what was the appropriate amount of parking.
Yeah, and certainly the petitioners can speak on this a little bit as well, and they still feel that it is underparked for the big events that they are foreseeing for this site. You know, when we looked at, you know, the Bryan Park is certainly an example of areas that get used very heavily, especially during the summertime. The parking areas are completely filled up, both on the park side as well as the swimming pool side. So the 5 spaces per acre, you know, it's just kind of a rough number, and, you know, it works well for passive areas that just kind of have a little bit of use here and there. This particular park, you're going to have high use times. When they've got major events, you know, things possibly like market events, farmers markets, concerts, anything that is using the pavilion, you know, they fully expect that they were going to have to shuttle people to the site because there's just still not going to be enough parking on site. So the 5 spaces per acre, and like I said, it's based on, you know, a typical active park, but this is something more than that. You know, this is something that people from outside the community are going to be coming to. It's not just people that live right next to here, but people from all over the place. So while it certainly is on the Beeline Trail, and they will be encouraging bicyclists and pedestrian activity, they do need to park people and the high activity events, and the lack of any spillover parking on surrounding streets really presented the high need that they need to have more parking. And you know, like I said, they would want to have more, but, you know, working within the environmental constraints and all of the other setbacks, you know, it kind of just laid itself out.
Okay, thank you for explaining that a little bit further. That's all I have.
What does daylighting a stream mean?
Basically, it just means, you know, taking a stream that is in a culvert and opening it back up to the natural air. So rather than being completely contained within a structure, you've got open stream bed, you've got dirt on both sides. It's no longer contained with a culvert that has a top and sides on it.
Thank you. Do you have any way to blow up the entrance and the parking lot? It's very difficult to see on.
So yeah, I have 2 slides here. So this is a slide of just the entrance area. Yep, so north is to the right. So Rogers Street is on the front here. So there will be an entrance lane, an entrance-only lane that is on the south side of the site. And then you have the 20-foot median that is planned. The median will have a mix of limestone blocks, kind of large quarry blocks, as well as some landscaping within there. And then you'll have 2 exit lanes on the north side of that. You know, given the high amount of activity, vehicular activity at the site, like I said, especially at large events, having 2 exit lanes was very important in order to be able to allow for people to leave the site in some kind of a timely manner, as well as accommodate semi-truck traffic on the site for the occasional times when they need to have large deliveries related to the large events that are here.
And line of sight wise, there's a lot of traffic on Rogers Street, including cyclists. Is it recessed a bit so that
No, I
anticipate some of that?
and the engineer could possibly speak to some of those technical questions there, but no, it is not going to be recessed, to my understanding. It will be flush with the street grade currently.
Okay. And then how, if there are shuttles, where are they going to turn? How are they going to drop people off and then exit?
The petitioner could probably answer that a
That'd be
little bit
great.
better.
Thank you, sorry. So 2 quick questions. I'm worried about line of sight with all the traffic. We have, Rogers is well-traveled, as you know, and 388 cars is a lot on that single-lane road, on that, well, there's 2 lanes, but single lane, one way.
As far as dropping off in shuttle, Eric, can you blow up the parking lot? Do we have the pavilion? Essentially, they will be able to come in that main entrance, what we're calling the boulevard, and pull up alongside the pavilion.
I'm sorry, it's really hard to,
Yeah.
what my, and could you show us the pavilion again, please?
So the pavilion is the, no, you can't see the end. I don't have a choice here. I can either magnify or I can,
Can you point to it with your finger at all?
let me,
Does it have a red dot? We don't know.
Yeah, they're all red.
There, you,
There we go.
There.
perfect,
so
right
that's,
there.
that is
That's
the
it.
pavilion right there.
So the shuttle bus pulls up to the pavilion.
It pulls up to the pavilion, would drop off, and then follow the drive back out and around to Rogers. So we just essentially make a circle through
Got
the
it.
parking lot, drop off at the pavilion, and then go on
Great,
out.
thank you.
Correct.
What about the ease of exit and entrance on Rogers? I know we have the boulevard, but the line of sight I'm worried about. It seems to be, it's hard to tell, sorry, with this drawing.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So, let me go back to that slide here. So along the Rogers Street side, you've got a sidewalk that is coming in, that kind of wraps around. Sorry, I can't point here and magnify at the same time. But we will certainly make sure that they've got line of sight along both sides. Rogers Street does have a side path on the west side of the street, and a sidewalk along the east side of the street. As I mentioned, we certainly want to have promote a lot of pedestrian and bicyclists using the site. They've got these limestone blocks, which are the large rectangles that you see now. Any landscaping will be set back further from those so that you do have open line of sight along all of that. And that's something that we're still continuing to work with them on, the design of this. They're at about 50-60% design of this area, so it's not completely flushed out yet. But we'll certainly make note to make sure that we do have good sight distances along both sides of those entrances.
Has the neighborhood association had any concerns about that, entrance and exit?
I don't know if any were brought up at the master plan stage. Certainly with this petition, we required them to notify everybody within 300 feet. There was a lot of public notices that were sent out. I did not get anything about the entrance and drive from any members of the public.
Okay, thank you. Carolyn? Nothing?
I have a follow-up. So I just have a follow-up question, Eric. So there's no left turn lane currently being proposed for Rogers as you head south to turn into the park?
No, there is not a dedicated left turn lane currently. With the side path that was just recently installed, within the past few years, I don't think there's probably room in the existing right-of-way to get a dedicated left turn lane. If it was a more commercial center that had regular traffic, that might be something that we could look into further. And certainly with this being a city project and adjacent to city right-of-way, if that's something that is needed in the future, we can look at incorporating that. But I don't think on the 70% users on a daily basis, it'll be that high of a demand. Parks don't usually have a center peak time. The amount of time and traffic using it is pretty consistent over the days. Certainly you're going to have more a little bit later in the afternoons and evenings. But with the multiple access points to the park as a whole, both from Rogers and Grimes and Walnut Street, although there will be a lot of parking on the Rogers Street side, I think all three sides of it will kind of help disperse the traffic input and output. But no, to answer your question, there's not a
Not
dedicated
at this
left turn
time.
lane.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment? Any final comments from the petitioner? Thank you. And we'll stay with one case at a time, if that's comfortable for staff. So we have CUV-26-17, back to the board for action.
Okay, so I am very excited to move that approval of this case, UV-18-17, according to the findings that are proposed and the conditions in the staff report.
Second? We have a second? I would only add the comment that it's just very exciting, the whole park, and I think it's fantastic. I think that you are going to have some problems with Rogers Street, and anything you can do to ameliorate that long-term would be helpful to the community too, because I think it's just going to be a premier project in Bloomington. So, any comments? Okay. Carmen? Yes.
Clapper.
Yes.
And motion passes, petition is granted. And next up, just have to get in our 100-page packet, I just got to get to the next one. We have, is that for, I'm sorry, is that for both or just one? I passed the second one. So the first
So the
one,
use variance is the next one.
okay.
The use variance 18-17.
I'm just, what's the number?
We just did UV-18-17,
18-17.
so now we're going to do this one.
Thank you. Now we're going to do CUV-26-17, sorry. Is there any addition to the staff report?
No.
Okay. Petitioner's rep, do you have anything additional to add? Thank you. Any comments or questions from board? None? Anyone in the public like to comment? Seeing none, back to the board.
Okay, so I move approval of case CUV-26-17 with the proposed findings and the suggested conditions.
Any other comments? Carmen?
Stewart Gulyas? Yes. Aquila?
Yes.
Clapper?
Yes.
Motion passes, petition is granted. Thank you.
Very exciting.
And we will be hearing V-20-17 as soon as they fire up the gas generator over there. Thank you.
Of course, yeah, no,
The downside of the electronic is,
it's a lot to wait through.
Oh, yeah, you did. Where are they? Oh, there they are.
and we're welcoming back Joe Hoffman, direct from recusal.
Thank you for your patience. This is case number V-20-17. It comes to us from City Optical, doing business as Dr. Tavel. The property is located on the east side of the community. This is in the Greater College Mall shopping area. This is in the shopping center known as Eastland Plaza. Dr. Tavel is a tenant in one of the spaces in this shopping center. The property is zoned commercial arterial. You get an idea of the location here. In the foreground is the Hoo Hot restaurant. To the left is a multi-tenant center sign for the shopping center. And in the background of the image is the larger shopping center. Multiple tenants, I believe there's 20 or more tenants. And then this is the spot where Dr. Tavel is located. The space is about 20 feet wide. Again, it's zoned commercial arterial. This larger area around College Mall, the Growth Policies Plan calls it a community activity center because of the conglomeration of shopping and retail and office space. The petitioner tonight is requesting a variance from the city's sign regulations. They're requesting to place a sign that is a little less than 64 square feet. What you can see on the image now is the existing sign. That existing sign is about 66 square feet. That sign was placed in 2007. There are ambiguous city records about whether or not that sign was appropriately permitted. A permit was applied for. There are records that something was paid for, but we can't find a record of what exactly was approved. So our records are not good from going on a decade now. So it's not clear if the permit was granted erroneously or the permit was denied. But a permit was applied for and the sign eventually was placed. As I stated, this tenant space is about 20 feet wide. Based on the city code, based on the UDO, a tenant of 20 feet in width would be permitted a 30 square foot sign. Again, this existing sign is a little more than twice that. It's 66 square feet, and the proposed new sign is 64 square feet. So the variance is to allow for a sign that's more than double what is allowed by the UDO. The sign is, or the tenant space is more than 400 feet away from the main streets, East 3rd Streets. The petitioner has included in the packet some analysis of sign visibility, looking at the gaps in the shopping center, looking at the way cars travel east and west along 3rd Street and how this particular tenant space is visible or not visible based on that traffic. I'll let them speak a little bit more to that during their time. However, the Planning and Transportation Department, we don't find any peculiar conditions associated with this one tenant space. This tenant space is no different than any other tenant space within the shopping center or any other shopping center within Bloomington. It's a very typical strip mall multi-tenant shopping center. There's no unique conditions of this particular space. This shopping center was developed with outlots going back to the early 90s. Those outlots created some visibility issues, but the majority of those outlots were either created by or still owned by the same people who own the shopping center. Variances require findings of fact. One of the findings of fact deal with injury to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. We found that there's no injury to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare with the sign. We find the second criteria deals with the use and value of the properties adjacent to the variance. We find there's no adverse impacts. However, state criteria does require that the Board of Zoning Appeals find peculiar conditions and practical difficulties, peculiar conditions on the property, and practical difficulties in abiding by the standards of the city code. And here, the department recommends that the board find that there are no peculiar conditions and no practical difficulties. The department recommends that the board adopt the proposed findings in your reports and deny the variance. I'd be happy to answer any questions after the petitioner has had an opportunity to speak.
Representative? Can you please state your name?
Jeffrey Morgan, I'm with Sign Art LLC, offices at 2525 North Shadeland, Indianapolis, Indiana.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
You have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Okay, first thing I'm going to present, their calculations on the existing sign. They're referring to the calculations on this erroneous permit. If you use their calculations where they square it off in a box, there's a drastic difference between what we're proposing. The existing sign, if you look at the way it is, you square it off, it comes up to 102, almost 103 square feet. The proposed sign is 61% less, which is a 63.65. You look down at the bottom, that is meeting city code, the 29.9. Now, the problems you're going to have is like when they were referring to the visibility. I mean, even when they showed the sign from the street on their photo, you couldn't make out what it was. I mean, all that causes is traffic problems. People trying to find the sign, they have 3 seconds to see that sign. That's while they're driving, and that's in an ideal situation. Now, you're driving parallel to the sign, so not only are you trying to view that sign, you're turning your head and trying to do, so you have 3 seconds. If you turn your head for 3 seconds, you're going to have serious problems. So what we're looking to do, take down the old sign. This erroneous permit, the sign was probably never put up. I've been doing Dr. Tavel's work since 1979. We've never changed that sign more than once. It was originally a premium optical. They show that the outlots were developed in 1990. Dr. Tavel has been there for 40 years, well before the development of the outlets. That's what makes him unique to this scenario, is that he's been there for 40 years. He's one of the only tenants that have been there, the mainstay of that center, for 40 years. He's taken care of students. He's taken care of residents. He's employed residents and students all these years, you know, been a good partner with the city of Bloomington. So I've dealt with Dr. Tavel for a while, and he didn't want to change his sign at all. He says, if I got to reduce square footage, I'm not going to do a thing. Finally got him to a point that they're rebranding. They're rebranding, and I've done 4 locations already, same layout, and have had no problems with it. It's just a drastic reduction from there to there. And what you're talking about, this is an old style sign. It's old. It's having its problems. I've changed faces on it several times. It's seen its day. It's the old style. It has neon inside of it. The neon is high voltage, not like today. The new sign would all have LEDs. It would be a green sign. It would leave less of a footprint. And it would also be a nice, newer look, and it would tie him in with all the other signs in his multiple stores. The other thing is yes, he only has 20 feet of width, but he's got 108 feet of depth. This is actually one of the biggest stores that he has, and he's got like 24 stores all over Indiana. So there is a couple of unique things, and like I said, he's been there for 40 years. They didn't develop the outlots. My grandparents actually built the Travelodge across the street. So I've seen the change in that area, and it has changed dramatically. And viewing time and letter size is important as far as signs goes. And go to the SBA, go wherever you want. They'll show the importance of having the proper sign, how it's involved in the success of a business. Essentially, this 1.5-inch letter, you guys are probably the right distance, about 14 or 15 feet. This is what you're seeing. And you're looking at it straight on. You're not looking at it 20 feet in the air, and you're not moving 35 miles an hour when you're looking at it. So the proper size sign is essential. We're not asking for anything bigger. It is bigger than the city code. We're cutting the size down of the existing sign. As far as I know, it's legally established. I went through my records. Dr. Tavel went through his records. They show no sign change at that location. So as far as I'm concerned, that is a legally established non-conforming sign. We're just looking to improve it, actually bring it closer to code, but make it also green and more environmentally friendly and better looking. Essentially, that's my case. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions? Joe?
For staff, I think the staff report indicates that there are no other, I mean, there are many other properties in this shopping center that are essentially in the same position that this one is in.
Yes.
Okay.
No other questions? Yes.
And what do you mean in the same position as this one?
Well, they're all at similar distance from the streets. Some of them are the same or similar widths. They all have the issues that the petitioner raised about visibility from Third Street. That's what I mean by similar situation, position.
Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment? Okay. Any final comments from the petitioner?
The only thing I had to say is I've pulled sign permits all over Indiana, all over the country. The lineal foot per square foot is, I don't think is a good system, because like in this situation where you have a tall building and a small frontage, the sign isn't in proportionate to the building. If you give it a percentage, then it doesn't look like a postage stamp. You know, if you say you're allowed to have 25% of your building, then every building is consistent. So, and a lot of them also take in consideration the amount of square footage is the viewing distance. And that's, I mean, that's not here, but you do have your code, so.
Thank you. Back to the board for action.
I am going to move for a denial of V 20-17 on the grounds of no peculiar condition on the petition site.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
If you vote yes, you're voting for denial.
That's right.
I know.
Okay.
We've had some confusion in the past. Any comments?
Yeah, I would encourage petitioner, we are in the middle of the process of writing a new zoning code, and I would encourage petitioner to raise the points you make about the sign ordinance.
Oh, I would love to. I've sat in with the city of Greenwood, I've sat in with the
Sir,
city of Indianapolis.
there is no more speaking from the
Sorry,
petitioner,
I'm
so you can have
I'm
a
just
seat.
encouraging you to come back and talk to us, because over the next year, we're going to be going through that code revision, and some of the points you raise might be persuasive. Thank you.
Any other comments? Carmen?
Stuart Goulias?
Yes, sorry.
Clapper?
Yes.
Aquila?
Yes.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Thank you. Denial of V-20-17 is passed.
Okay, thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
Next case to be heard is V-21-17. Royal Toyota.
As stated, this is case V2117. This comes to us from Royal Toyota. Property is located at 3115 South Walnut Street. This is on the far south side of the community, along the South Walnut Street's commercial corridor. The property is located just south of Winslow and north of Gordon and Roar. It's on the east side of the road. It's surrounded by some apartments to the east, a document destruction company, and many warehouses to the north, and the existing Royal Toyota to the south. The site is about 6 1/3 acres, and it's zoned commercial arterial CA, which is a heavy commercial zoning district. Again, this is a community activity center land use area and the growth policies plan, much less like the last case. And the property is vacant. About 15 years or so ago, the owner got approval for a commercial subdivision. That never happened. After approval, they did start doing a little bit of earthwork, removing some rock, removing a few trees, and the property is kind of set empty since then. Give you an idea of the lay of the land. This is looking to the north, from the south, looking northeast. To the right of the image is the existing Royal Toyota parking lot or a car storage area. And then this is looking the opposite direction. So this is just north of the site, looking to the southeast. You can see a pile of stone there that have been moved off the property, or on the property. What the petitioner would like to do is expand the auto sales use. So the auto sales use to the south of Arroyo Toyota, they're successful. They'd like to have opportunities for more display of vehicles, more parking of cars for sale. And they're proposing to expand that display area in 2 phases. What you're seeing here is phase 1, but this variance would also partially apply to phase 2. That's on the right of the image. And it may include a structure in the future, it may not. Most likely it will, but this variance would apply whether they choose to build that structure or not. In order to accomplish this, again, car sales is a permitted use in the zoning district. They are requesting 3 different variances. These are variances that have become common for auto sales uses. The first is to allow for vehicles between the building and the streets. The second is, and the second 2 deal with some minor changes to the landscaping requirements. When the UDO was created in 2006, there was some discussion about auto sales and how to deal with auto sales in terms of some of our new parking regulations. Would car display areas be considered parking lots? Yes. Would they be considered for our maximum parking requirements? No. It's display of merchandise for sale. How would the front parking setback work? And what was discussed at the City Council, the Plan Commission at the time, is that we need to look at each individual case, look at the layout of the land, look at the layout of the proposed auto sales use, and try to find opportunities to create display areas while not creating a lot of parking display areas in between buildings and the streets. The existing Royal Toyota is, let's see if I have an image of how far they are from, yeah, so the red line in this image on the bottom of the image, that is where the existing building is. So everything to the left, to the west of this in this image, to the west of that line, is parking or display area within the parking setback. So that's the variance number 1, to allow for this expansion of this existing display area partially within that parking setback. The second variance, and the red image, is a potential future building. Again, this display area in between this small service building and the rest of the display area. And the second 2 variances deal with landscaping. So the petitioners are proposing that some of the required parking lot perimeter shrubs not be the 4 feet that are required by the UDO. It's approximately 25% of the shrubs, and that 25% is along the front of the property, is along the streets. Yes, these are cars, and normally the city's goal is to try to shield the view of cars from the streets. In this case, the cars are what's for sale. The cars are the merchandise. Again, with the same thing with the large canopy trees. The code requires 75% of parking lot trees to be large canopy trees. The petitioner is proposing a slightly reduced standard, 63%, in order to make sure that sap and leaves and nuts and bird droppings aren't falling on brand new cars, which the department believes is reasonable. And then finally, there was another variance approved on the Royal Toyota back in 1997. That was a landscaping variance. One of the conditions of that landscaping variance was a row of evergreen trees and evergreen shrubs along the north side of the display area, north side of the parking lots. Those trees and shrubs are going to be moved. They're going to be moved elsewhere on the property to combine this into one unified site, as well as to create a natural green water filtration area in between the 2 parts of the lot. We believe that there are peculiar conditions dealing with the auto sales use, which is different than other kinds of parking lots and other kinds of commercial developments. There are tree preservation requirements. There are trees on the lots, but the trees are in the back side of the lot. There are a couple of small karst features on the property, but again, those are on the back side of the property, pushing all development further in front and further closer to the streets. There's also a peculiar condition in the placement of that existing building on the lot to the south. This is a unified site. They're not going to move that building in order to meet a parking setback. It's a fixed point. So with all that being said, again, the peculiar conditions, the environmental constraints, this existing large display area, the nature of the cars being the merchandise that require visibility, compatibility with the surrounding development, as well as the issues dealing with the display vehicles versus regular customer parking spaces. We do believe this petition meets the criteria required by the code and state law. The department does recommend that the BZA adopt the proposed findings and approve the variances with 3 conditions, and those are listed there. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have after the petitioner has had an opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Please state your name.
Don Kacharik with Smith Prehab.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Okay, thank you. Royal South Toyota hired us a few months ago to look at this site. They have some kind of issues with display and parking, employee parking, and parking for service. And kind of our 2 tasks were to develop this site and clean it up. There's a lot of kind of rock and debris and scrub kind of growing on it. And then also to not, to kind of keep some of the natural features of the site. There's a lot of kind of exposed rock that we're leaving. We didn't want to get into bringing in a whole lot of fill dirt and hammering out rock to install a parking lot essentially for display vehicles. So that's kind of where this kind of unique shape it came from, with vehicles displayed kind of directly off of the Walnut Street right away, and then further in the back, those would be elevated kind of up on top of some of that exposed rock. So we wanted to kind of prevent a lot of the earthwork excavation and clean up the site were kind of a couple of the goals. We, as far as the landscape, we're meeting all of the density requirements. We have all of the correct number of shrubs in the different categories, the interior and the parking lot perimeter. And as James said, we want to keep some of the ones in front lower so they don't block the display vehicles. And then some of the trees, we wanted to use the narrower columnar trees to not block some of the views. And I think that pretty much sums it up. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Back to the board with questions for staff or petitioner. Anyone? Doesn't appear to be any. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment? Seeing none, any final comments from the petitioner?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Back to the board for action.
I'll move approval of B-21-17 based on the findings set forth in the staff report and with the 3 conditions of approval that are set forth in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Comments? Carmen?
Clapper?
Yes.
Stewart Williams? Yes.
Nicola?
Yes.
Kaufman?
Yes.
Motion passes. Petition is granted. Is the chair switching thing part of the act? We just want to know. It's just to make it look as there's extra effort. Next case is V-22-17, Old National Bank.
This is a request from Old National Bank for property at 2718 East 3rd Street. This site was the former home of the Old National Bank that was constructed sometime in the early 2000s. The bank and this site has been empty for the past 4 or 5 years, ever since Main Source Bank took over Old National and built another office just to the east of this. So the site has sat empty. The College Mall is just to the southeast of this. To the north is a CVS. To the northwest, you've got a Red Lobster, and then to the west, on the west side of the bypass, you've got some gas stations and fast food restaurants. So the petitioner, Old National Bank, but more specifically Burger King, is looking at redeveloping the site. I should also point out that the site does have a large stormwater culvert that runs kind of diagonal through the property, which is why the Old National Bank as well as the drive-through lanes are separated from the main business building itself. So that gap there where you've got the canopy is where you have 2 large underground stormwater culverts that run through the site. So the site has sat empty. The petitioners, prospective petitioners, would like to redevelop the site with a Burger King restaurant. And they are here tonight to request 3 variances. The variances being requested are from the maximum number of parking spaces allowed, from the building setback requirement, and from the parking setback requirement. So the site, as you can see, does have a slight corner of it, the northwest corner, that was acquired for right-of-way from INDOT several years ago when they were doing improvements to this intersection. So it created kind of a unique shape to the property. As well as the property is also a little bit unique in that it does have split zoning on the property. The west side is zoned commercial arterial, and the east side is zoned planned unit development and is part of the College Mall PUD. So the petitioners have tried to juggle a lot of different interests with this property, and so they are requesting approval tonight to allow for these variances for the site to be reused. The building setback requirement, as I mentioned, is somewhat related, or not somewhat, is related to the shape of the property, and specifically the northwest corner that's kind of been chunked off from the right-of-way acquisition that has happened. So the petitioners are requesting to allow for the northwest corner to encroach about 3-4 feet into that setback. This is being requested in order to allow the building to be brought a little bit closer to the street, which is always highly desired to promote pedestrian interaction. And they are also requesting a parking setback in order to allow for the driveway that accesses the drive-through lane to be located even with the front of the building. The Unified Development Ordinance requires all parking areas, including driveway aisles, that are located within the parking setback, or I'm sorry, that are parallel or less than parallel to the street to meet the parking setback requirement of 20 feet behind the building. So the drive-through lane, by that requirement, would need to be 20 feet back behind the front of the building. So due to the kind of unique shape of the lot and the location of the building and the culverts that run underneath there that kind of help or hurt the location of buildings on the site, the petitioner is trying to come up with a design that balances all of the needs and requirements of the zoning code. So the parking setback for variance that is being requested is strictly for the drive-through lane on the north side. All other parking spaces meet the parking setback requirement. The petitioner is also requesting a parking variance number in order to allow for more parking spaces than what the UDO allows for. So a restaurant of less than 5,000 square feet is allowed 1 parking space per 200 square feet of gross floor area. Based on the size of this restaurant, it's about 2,800 square feet. They will be allowed a maximum of 15 parking spaces. This Burger King, as is typical with a lot of fast food restaurants, on their maximum shift, they will have at least 12 employees on staff. So utilizing the 15 parking spaces would only leave 3 spaces left over for guests. This obviously is not enough to meet the needs of the restaurant. And as has been requested previously with many other parking variance numbers, staff directed the petitioner to do parking counts over a series of time at other restaurants and specifically here in Bloomington in order to get a better idea of the actual expected need. So the petitioner is requesting a variance in order to allow for 35 parking spaces. And in your packet, we have included the parking counts that were done at the 2 other locations. It's important to note, I guess, with this petition that the other Burger King that is just south of this on College Mall Road would be closed, so this would be taking its place. So the petitioners did parking counts at the 2 other restaurants here in town and analyzed the needs of those. So as staff has done with other parking variance requests, we have tried to look at the site as a whole and not base any recommendations on what the one-time maximum need might be, but more aim at kind of the 80% ratio there. You know, what is the demonstrated need for most of the time, not the 1, 15, 20, or 30-minute time period where they are, at maximum capacity. So while the petitioners are requesting 35 parking spaces, staff is recommending 28 parking spaces be approved with this petition, which more accurately meets the need based on the kind of the 80% peak times that seem to occur more realistically and not just between the 11:30 and 12 o'clock rush hour time period. So this is something that is consistent with other variances that have been approved for fast food restaurants. Certainly with the adoption of the Unified Development Ordinance, we recognize that restaurants, especially some restaurants, would have a higher need, a higher parking need, and those would be handled on a case-by-case variance basis, which the board has heard a few requests over the past year, or several years, that is. So with that, staff did make findings for the variances. As I mentioned, the building setback variance is related to the unique shape of the lot, specifically the corner, the northwest corner that was taken from NDOT right-of-way standards, which does create a difficulty there, and it would require the building to be located even further back from the street. The location of the new proposed building would be in the same location, same setbacks as the existing building, and having the building closer to the street does provide a higher degree of pedestrian interaction, which is always desired. The parking setback for the drive-through lane on the north side of the site, as I mentioned, is once again designed around the unique shape of the lot, the kind of the narrowness of it, as well as the stormwater culverts that run underneath that force the building kind of up in the northwest corner and create some difficulty there in getting a drive-through lane. Once again, staff expected with corner lots, we were going to have some problems with drive-through lanes being provided and having the drive-through lane, even with the front of the building, still allows for the building to be located adjacent to the street, promotes that building forward design, the pedestrian friendliness. The reason for the parking setback requirement for drive-through lanes was to ensure that you don't have a drive-through lane between a building and the street. That is not the case with this petition. The drive-through lane is even with the front of the building, so you still have all the pedestrian interaction that's desired. The parking number variance, as I mentioned, we did expect and do find that this use does have a higher need than what the UDO does allow for, and that was based on the parking study that was done by the petitioner. So we are recommending that a maximum of 28 parking spaces be approved with this variance request. And as staff is recommending, the board adopt the findings as presented in staff's report with the 2 conditions, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Please state your name.
I'm Jeff Daniel.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 20 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank Eric, who's working with me for the past couple of months on working out these variance requests. And I also want to thank the staff for coming to a conclusion that we meet the standards for approval. The one thing that I would like to discuss with you is the maximum parking number. We started out with over 40 parking spaces, but when we were trying to bring the parking within the parking setback, the 20 feet beyond the face of the building, we lost about 7 spaces along the north side of the parking lot. So that brought us down to the 35. We also had to move some a dumpster pad and things like that around, and we lost another 2 based on a review we had by Burger King itself. So we're down to 33 spaces per this plan you see in front of you. We did do a parking study, and you have that in your packet. The two other stores. One was on West 3rd Street out by Curry Pike. They have 37 spaces provided. They were using 36 at their peak level. The other store is on South Walnut Street near Winslow and Country Club. They provided 40 spaces to their customers, and during the peak, they had 38 spaces full. So it kind of tells you what the level of the other stores generate above and beyond the 28 that's been recommended by the staff. I also want to point out that the traffic counts at this location are much higher than the other two locations, which would give an indication that this store is going to be busier than the other two locations. On the West 3rd Street, on State Road 48 or West 3rd, we're 26% more traffic at this College Mall location than the West 3rd Street. And you can see that they're using 36 of their 37 spaces. On their South Walnut Street, we're 43% higher traffic on College Mall than on South Walnut Street, and they had 40 spaces provided, and they were peaking out at 38. So I think with the additional traffic that we're going to have at this location and additional uses, people using this site, I feel like we can be justified in the 5 additional spaces above what the staff has recommended. I believe that this will help the adjoining properties, as our employees and our customers won't be spilling over into adjacent parking lots. I believe that's occurring now when BJ's went in recently. If you've been there, you actually have to park quite a ways away and walk to it, and you're on somebody else's, in someone else's area. I'd also like to point out that Panera Bread, they're just slightly under 5,000 square feet based on a GIS scaling, and they have 62 spaces, a little over the 1 per 100, which is right where we're at with our what's been recommended by the staff. So that comes in at about 1 space for 80 square feet of gross floor area for Panera Bread. And again, I think that the traffic they have, we're also going to expose to. We're going to have higher use, and I hopefully can convince you that we would need those additional spaces if you so see fit. I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Questions for staff and/or petitioner by the board? Barry?
Yes. Would the petitioner be opposed to adding any additional vegetation or screening in front of the drive-through area? It just, this building seems to me is very exposed on a lot of sides, and one of the issues is that drive-throughs kind of come forward toward the street, and I see there's some larger trees planned there, but I'm wondering about any potential screening from the street.
The only concern, in general, I don't have a concern about that, but we are placing a monument sign on the north side of the building and on the west side of the building, and as long as we could not block the sign, I don't see where there'd be a problem with that.
Where is that sign going?
Just north of where there's a north entrance, pedestrian entrance, and it'll be in that island area north of the building, and then there's another pedestrian entrance to College Mall, and that sign will be, I don't know if
Is
it's
it
on
toward the
there.
corner?
I don't think it's on that sheet there. Yeah. But it'll be just south of that walk that goes into the west side of the building.
But on the north side, that entrance, would the sign be to the east or to the west?
It'll be just to the east of that walk coming into the building.
Okay. Well, I guess that's just something I'm going to throw out. Let's keep for
I can work with the
consideration.
staff on that, too.
Okay.
Question for staff. Is there any change in the size of the street cuts or locations?
No. There is an existing drive cut that is along College Mall Road that is that will be utilized in the same location. That's what is currently there. So that's as far back from the intersection as they can possibly get. And I do not believe that there is one on 3rd Street, but that's in the same location as what's there now. This is an NDOT-controlled intersection, so they would have to get approval from NDOT for any
Great.
changes to those, but they're utilizing all the existing cuts.
Thank you. Joe?
Yeah, a couple of questions. First, for staff, so the diagram that's in our staff report at, well, it's the two main diagrams that show the parking and so forth. Those diagrams, by my count, show something like 35 parking spaces on the
Correct,
site?
yep.
Okay, so what would be the implications of reducing the parking? Have you spoken with petitioner about what that would mean for the layout of the site, and where those parking places would likely be taken from?
You know, that's a question for them. They would just need to figure out where those 7 parking spaces would be removed from. So that would be up to them.
Okay. Jeff, you said 33 is what you're now asking for?
Yes.
So what would be the alteration from this plan?
Well, if we were going down to 28 spaces, we would take the spaces that are in the southeast corner of the property.
The 5?
Yeah.
But leave those other 3 that are sort of around the corner from them?
I'd probably take those 3 out, get them away from that intersection, and
put
take
3
2
where the
more
5 are.
off that, where that 5 is.
Okay. A question for staff. When you are, I completely understand the rationale behind the 80% calculation of peak parking. In a context like this, you know, normally I would think that's great because there's lots of other parking, you know, at the mall to take up any slack during peak times. But did you take into consideration what's been going on? I mean, there have been a lot of changes in that part of the mall area within the past year, and my perception is actually that the parking has gotten really tight around where BJ's is and Panera, that we're kind of strained for parking in that area. Is that something that would you think should be sort of added into that 80% calculation?
You know, that is certainly something that was in our mind. However, you know, we certainly have to look at a variance based on the property, specifically by itself. And the petitioners have stated that they actually have a no parking easement with the College Mall, that they are not allowed to use any of those parking spaces.
So that's an irrelevancy in this petition.
Yeah. So, you know, restaurants are going to have a different peak time than the mall. You know, the mall usually is busy after 5 o'clock, whereas restaurants are usually, you know, especially this specific restaurant has their peak time between 11 o'clock to 12:30, 1 o'clock,
Okay.
you know, which is not the peak time for the mall.
Okay. One final question, this is back to you, Jeff. Where do you anticipate, I'm a little concerned about the fact that people who park along one of your parking areas are going to have to cross the drive-through one way or the other. Mm-hmm. And I don't see anything like a crosswalk or some kind of area that's protected for them to get across from that parking area. We have a couple situations like that in town now. I think they're kind of inherent dangers. Is it possible to have some kind of a marked raised strip or something? I'm thinking actually right where you get to the sign where the cars are going to naturally have to stop anyway, that maybe just in front of that sign, you could give those people who park in that area a chance to get to a sidewalk safely while crossing a row of drive-through traffic.
That might be a good location. Another one that I would perhaps suggest would be where the drive-through loops back to the the parking lane north of those
Right.
stalls.
Right.
That is an accessible route to that north door of that restaurant. And
Okay,
it
so
might be a
yeah,
little
that's another
shorter.
place where people have to stop
Yeah,
anyway.
right.
I'm not telling you which place it has to be, but I would like to see you do that.
Okay.
Carol? Yes.
Question for staff. What is the downside of giving them the parking spaces that they're asking for?
You know, the downside and certainly the reason for maximum parking numbers is to make sure that you have the most efficient use of property and that you don't have asphalt parking that is just sitting there, you know, radiating heat back up, you know, not giving you green space, not providing area for landscaping, and to most appropriately serve the needs for the property. Certainly, you know, you can argue that 4 or 5 parking spaces is not going to be the end of the world, but when we try to analyze what is the most appropriate need for this use, you know, that's kind of where we came at the 80%, which equals about 1 space per 100 square feet, which is typical in the UDO for a larger restaurant. So we were balancing not just, you know, the 80% need, but you know, also keeping it in line with what the UDO allows for other larger restaurants, which this, you know, need was a little bit maybe closer to.
One more quick thing. So do you take into account the fact that part of their traffic is drive-through, which people are not parking, they're driving through? Does that affect the accounting for the parking spaces? No.
No, not really, because the parking counts, you know, the other restaurants all have a drive-through component as well.
Oh, they do. Panera too?
Yes,
Oh,
Panera
I
too
didn't know.
as well, yeah. And the Panera actually is part of the College Mall. So the parking spaces that are associated with Panera were factored into the mall as a whole. We did not give Panera a separate number of parking spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Jeff, just curious about the way that the entries are situated in the northwest corner, and it just seems like quite a hike from the ADA spaces. I mean, they're the closest parking, but we're going all the way around the building. Was any other consideration given to try and pull those parking spaces forward of that trash enclosure, or maybe push that back a little?
Back when we had 40-some spaces, that's where they were, but we weren't meeting that 20-foot beyond the face of the building setback requirement. And then we started looking at if we did pull them back 20 feet, there was some reason why the Burger King corporate wouldn't allow those spaces to be on that side. They thought it would be a hazard. I can't remember why, unfortunately.
Okay. Just seems like it is quite a distance from the entry.
Yeah, ideally, we would have put them right behind the south side of that building, but we couldn't meet the setback and do that.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Is there anyone in the public that would like to comment? Would there like to be any final comments from the petitioner?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Back to the board.
I will move approval of these requested variances based on the findings and conditions, based on the findings set forth in the staff report, but I would like to modify condition of approval number 1 to a maximum of 31 parking spaces.
Is there a second? Please explain.
I think this is a balancing act in terms of how much parking is required, and adding 3 more means keeping one of those 2 asphalt or paved areas, but not the other one. So it's kind of splitting the difference between petitioners' 35 and the staff's 28 by letting, they have a 3 and a 5 shown in their diagram. That this will get rid of some pavement, but not all of it.
And that's based on the intensity of potentially this location over what was...
Right. I mean, obviously, in a variance like this one, we aren't being asked to go, we aren't, it's clear that the 15 is a hardship.
Right.
The question is how much is not a hardship. That is the kind of the balancing act that the staff and we are doing here. I'm not saying I don't disagree with the staff's general rule, but given the data that we have and the knowledge that 15 is too little, I think going a little bit higher than the 28 is justified.
Any comments from the staff on that?
No, our comments certainly just were reflected in the staff report based on what we've looked at for previous variances and we feel is appropriate. Certainly if the board wants to agree on a higher number, that is within your purview.
Would you entertain a friendly amendment?
Absolutely.
I would like to introduce another condition of approval that an effort to screen either with the combination of the sign or vegetation, the drive-through be made on the north side of the building.
I will accept that as a friendly amendment. If,
How's that wording for staff?
So what?
generally, we would
right-
phrase it something like petitioner will work with the staff
Staff
to seek an opportunity to achieve some kind of screening of the drive-through.
Of the drive-through.
That allows the staff
That's
the
fine.
discretion.
Exactly. You know what the intent is.
Yes.
Any other comments? Carmen?
Do you need a second? Was there a second?
He
I
accepted your
accepted
friendly
it.
You
amendment.
accept the amendment? Okay.
Aquila?
No.
Clapper?
Yes.
Stewart Gulyas? Yes. Hoffman?
Yes.
Motion passes. Petition is granted. Would you guys like a short break? We've got, how many more
Okay,
cases?
2 more.
Let's take a short
That's
5-minute
fine.
break.
You bet.
We'll take a short 5-minute break, please. We'll rejoin you shortly.
Immediately west of the Prospect Hill neighborhood and south of Rose Hill Cemetery. This is the northeast corner of a chunk of commercial land that butts up against the cemetery to the north, Prospect Hill to the east, and then some recently redeveloped office and multifamily uses to the west across the creek. The property is 1.25 acres. It's zoned commercial general, CG, which is a medium-intensity commercial zoning district. The growth policies plan actually calls this as an employment center. An employment center land use category really dates back to the Rogers Building Supply property there along Patterson, going back to some of those policies surrounding redeveloping that for employment uses. Sitting on the property now is a 1-story single-family house and a locally designated historic church building. For many years, this property was used for a electric contractor. Again, the cemetery to the north, the Prospect Hill to the east. To the south is a property that's recently been redeveloped with a fitness center, and to the west is an office building. Here's the property looking to the this is just northeast of the property, near the corner of 3rd and Walker. Looking to the southwest, you can see the historic church in the foreground. Behind those trees is a house that would be torn down. Just to the right of the image, you can see the edge of the limestone wall of Rose Hill Cemetery. The petitioners, Milestone Ventures, would like to demolish that one house and redevelop this property for affordable housing. Altogether, the property would contain 40 units and 49 bedrooms. Again, this is an affordable project. The future tenants would be a mix of low and moderate income individuals, as well as people experiencing homelessness, moving out of homelessness, and those with disabilities. So the historic church is being remodeled for office space and a couple units, and then a new 3-story building is being built on the west side, proposed to be built on the west side of the property, up against the existing 3-story office building. To accomplish this, they are asking for 3 variances. The first is to have first-floor residential units in a commercial district. The second is a very minor front parking setback issue along Walker Street. And then the third is a variance from the minimum parking standards, which is a little different than the one we just talked about. That was a maximum parking variance. This is a minimum parking variance. Again, 3-story multifamily, 40 units, 49 beds. The site plan as shown includes 49 parking spaces on the property and the 9 parking spaces along the streets, new street spaces or reconfigured street spaces. And again, this is serving low-income individuals. We'll step you through some images very quickly. Again, ground floor. The proposal here, the main proposal is the use variance to allow for the first floor to be used for residential uses instead of commercial or office uses. This is being done for a couple different reasons. One, this is a transitional area. This is a strange area for office space or retail commercial space. There's not a lot of drive-by traffic. It's tucked in. It's embedded into this quiet part of the street. Again, this is an affordable housing project, so every dollar matters. And the petitioner would like to have the first floor units to meet their accessibility requirements, so they don't need to build a elevator to the upper stories. This is the view of the building along the parking lots. So the 3rd Street's to the right of the image, and the church would be in the foreground. Some other images, again, the same one you saw to the top. The middle right would be the street edge, and then the bottom image would be what would be up against that office building to the west. The Plan Commission reviewed this at their last meeting. They reviewed the use variance component, and they voted favorably to forward a 7-0, a unanimous vote to forward a favorable recommendation to the BZA about the use variance. Again, the properties at the corner of this commercial area, corner of this employment center components, and there's a real changing nature. This is a real transitional area between the residential and Prospect Hill, transitioning into some of the more intense office and really quasi-industrial uses still here along Walker, and then across the street to the redevelopment area of Patterson with the multifamily uses and some other new uses there. The front parking setback variance is really, it's dealing with the fact that the historic church does not sit parallel to Walker Streets. If you measure the parking setback from one corner, it meets. If you measure it from the other corner, it doesn't. We think this is a very minor request, and we recommend approval of this also. The last item deals with the minimum parking requirements. So there's very few areas in the city where the UDO still requires a minimum number of parking spaces. There's some portions of the downtown, and then for multifamily adjacent to the residential core zoning district, there's a minimum standard of 1 space per bedroom. In this case, that'd be 49 parking spaces. The site plan shown on the screen includes 41 spaces. However, the site plan doesn't meet the minimum parking lot island requirements. There needs to be some tweaks made. So when everything's said and done, that'll come down to 38. So 38 parking spaces for these 49 bedrooms. We believe that the nature of the project, the nature of the future tenants, and their needs or parking needs. The petitioner has had a lot of success with other projects. They're an established affordable housing provider, and they found that their tenants have a much lower parking need than the general population. In addition, there's parking available on the street. There's 9 parking spaces available on the streets. The property is not that far from bus lines on both 2nd and 3rd Streets. I believe it's a little bit more than a quarter-mile walk to the bus lines. And all that being said, we believe that the parking variance is also appropriate. So again, parking setback to deal with the church not being parallel to Walker Streets, the use variance to permit the first floor as accessible, affordable housing instead of a commercial space in this transitional zone, and the variance from the minimum parking standards, 38 spaces instead of the typically required 49. And with that, the department does believe that the petition meets the state and locally mandated criteria for both the use variance and the design standards variances. We recommend that you adopt the proposed findings and approve the variances with the 4 conditions as shown on the screen. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? And you are, please state your name.
Jeff Fanyo.
You're already sworn in. You have up to 20 minutes to present your petition.
Well, as James said, this is an affordable project. 8 units will be for disabled, 8 will be for the homeless, and then the remainder of the units will be for low-income residents that meet the 60% median income. We've been through the Plan Commission and had some suggestions regarding, and James has covered that, regarding the landscaping islands and the parking reduction. I really have no other, anything to add to his presentation. I think he's covered it very well, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Questions, Carol? Joe?
James, you mentioned the petitioner's track record with other somewhat similar projects. Can you give us a little more information about that, both in terms of the parking and in terms of the appropriateness of the use?
If I
Sure,
can, I'll answer.
that's fine.
Milestone works with the Life Designs here in Bloomington, and they've done 2 other projects. Crawford 1 that's up and operating, and Crawford 2 that's being constructed now. They have found that most of their tenants use alternate means of transportation, specifically bicycles, scooters, mass transit, bus lines, and they have reduced parking requirement as a result.
Okay, thank you.
Barry?
Question just for the petitioner. So the building on the south side sits out of the ground about 9 or 10 feet. What's happening down there? Are there any units in the basement?
I believe there's a mechanical room. You see a glazing on that door in what would be the southeast corner of the building.
Okay.
And I believe that's where we're bringing, if I recall correctly, that's where we're bringing our fire service in, but I'm not positive about that.
Okay, there are no the plans weren't included. I was just curious, since it sits out of the ground so high.
Yeah,
on
that is the
south side.
riser room.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Anyone in the public like to comment? Any final comments from the petitioner?
No.
Okay, back to the board.
I will move approval of UV-V-2317, based on the findings and conditions in the staff report and with the 4 conditions of approval that are in the staff report.
Is there a second? Second. Any final comments? Carmen? I'm sorry, Carolyn. Yes.
I lived right behind that church, which used to have a very large neon Jesus Saves sign. And I'm really gratified to see this development in this affordable housing happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Carmen?
Yes.
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 Motion passes, petition is granted. Thank you. Next, you're not staying for the last one? Next case is CU-24-17.
This petition comes to us tonight from Wheeler Missions Ministries. They operate a homeless shelter on South Westplex Avenue. This is the near west side. Westplex Avenue, if you're not familiar with it, it's a cul-de-sac that cuts to the north off of 3rd Street. So this is the first intersection to the west of Patterson. We're actually very close to the previous petition. And the Wheeler Mission, which was recently Backstreet Mission, is the first building to the right as you come north into Westplex. Property zone plan unit developments. This PUD is a mix of industrial, commercial, and housing. There's some duplexes further northwest along Westplex. The growth policies plan calls out for community activity center style of uses and development in this area. And surrounding on all sides are commercial uses. Here's an image of the existing building being used as a shelter. This building's been used as a shelter since at least 2000. The BZA approved a conditional use in 2000 for a homeless shelter here. There was a maximum of 20 individuals, 20 overnight stays at that time. With some changes to the building and changes to the interior layouts, they were able to find room for some more individuals, and that number was increased to 50 with an additional revised conditional use in 2003. With this petition tonight, the Wheeler Mission is asking to revise that number again. That 50 number was really placed because of capacity maximums in the structure itself. But the petitioner has found opportunities to install a sprinkler system in the building, which will allow for the occupancy to increase from 50 to 130. Now, not all of those would be overnight stays. Some of that would be staff or visitors or volunteers. They anticipate probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 overnight stays. Criteria. This is a conditional use. It needs to be reviewed by the board. The department believes the general standards have been met for the conditional use, and that those standards really focus on compliance with the comprehensive plan and impacts of the surrounding properties, and we feel that those impacts are negligible. This property has a long-standing use as a shelter with no known negative impacts, and there's a growing and real need for additional overnight shelter space in the city, and this will fill that needed community need. So just some facts. The facility is open 24/7. Again, it's been used on the site without any known undue impacts since at least 2000. No new infrastructure needs. There's no anticipated needs for additional parking. Access to sidewalks, access to the bus line on 3rd Street makes this a great location. And the department does recommend that the board adopt the proposed findings in the reports and approve the conditional use with the 2 conditions as listed. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Petitioner's representative? Please
Good
state your
evening.
name.
Dwayne Gordon from Wheeler Mission Ministries.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 20 minutes.
Thank you. The petition was stated well, so I'll be brief. I think the Herald Times coined the statement this summer of crisis on Kirkwood. And what we're seeing is a real big increase in homeless and specifically overdoses and drug addiction in our community. And so we're attempting to answer this call by putting shelter outside of the immediate downtown area and centralizing it. So Wheeler has participated with the Interfaith Winter Shelter in last year specifically. But the Interfaith Winter Shelter and Wheeler think that a single location would be best for a number of reasons. One, it just impacts the community, helps the business owners on Kirkwood, the city itself, IU students. It helps address some of the panhandling issues that we've had here recently, but most importantly to us is to try to help those individuals that are experiencing the homelessness, especially as we approach November, December, some of these cold winter months where people could potentially freeze to death. And so I think there are a number of benefits to doing this in a central location. Police calls, EMT calls, things like that, if we can centralize it and have training in Narcan and how do we deal with some of these overdose issues. So we know that we had the capacity square footage in our facility. One of the things that we did, Wheeler Mission, when we came and acquired Backstreet Mission, we centralized many of our admin functions, and so we're able to take some of that office space and admin space, which is almost half of the building, and centralize that and bring it back up to Indianapolis and to some of our other locations. So that opened up the facilities for an increase in being able to house people. One of the things that we had to look at with the fire marshal was, now that we're changing use of the building, in other words, taking some of these offices and some of this other square footage and changing the use and making it a place where people stay, we'd need to sprinkle the building. And so that's something that we're willing to do. We've got the permits started and our estimations are done, and we've worked with a contractor, and we think that's going to be somewhere around $92,000 to $100,000 is our estimate. We're willing to do that investment in order to help, and we're here with a lot of support from the Interfaith Winter Shelter community as well. So thank you very much for hearing us.
Thank you.
Yep.
Questions for staff and/or petitioner, Barry? Joe? No? No? Anyone in the public like to comment? Please.
Good evening.
Please state your name.
I am Dr. Chris Heater.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. I am the owner of the building north of Wheeler Mission at 201 Southwest Plex. That building that I now own was owned by Backstreet Mission, and we purchased that building from them back 7 years ago when Linda Kelly was part of Backstreet Mission. And I have a business that leases through our LLC that is a fitness facility. We have a couple of concerns. There have been some problems in that area. First of all, we are concerned about the number of occupants in that building increasing to 130, both from the health aspect of those people staying there, their physical health. Putting that many people in a building, sleeping every night, could increase spread of diseases, flu, pneumonia, things like that, and as well as the mental health of some of those people. I mean, I haven't been to the churches where they've been at, but it seems that they're going to be in a much smaller situation. And if they're under the influence, this is a low barrier shelter now, as opposed to when Backstreet was there, it was a high barrier shelter. And that, there's a concern for them, their health and safety there. That spreads to the outer area of the area businesses. We've had a number of problems with people loitering and trespassing. We've had some people who have been threatened, and we have had some fires behind the buildings. So there are situations where there are people who have not been comfortable staying at the shelter, who have moved behind the building and built fires. We've had the fire department out there several times to put those out. And again, we've had a couple of people being threatened that we're concerned that that's going to increase with the number of low barrier people in a much smaller area. The area going into that area to the mission, as well as to all the other businesses back there, is not well lit. There are no street lights, city street lights. It is dark, and some of our people who work at our facility come as early as 5:30 in the morning. And as we're pulling off of West 3rd Street onto West Plex Avenue, there are men wandering in the street in the dark. And a couple of them have been incapacitated and sitting in the street. A few of them have almost been hit a couple of times. And we're worried that with an increased number of people in that facility, if they're all leaving as the shelter is closing down in the morning, or as they're coming together to meet in the evening, a lot of people congregating in that road is going to cause some problems.
Thank you. Please state your name.
I'm Reverend Bruce Irvin.
Do you swear to tell the truth and the whole truth, but nothing but the truth?
Yes.
You have up to 5 minutes, please.
I serve on, I knew what you said. I serve on the President's Advisory Council to Wheeler Mission. We are a group of Bloomington residents who provide counsel and advice to all of Wheeler's staff, not only their president, Rick Alvis, but also and especially their Bloomington staff. We represent a group of churches across the city, Protestant and Catholic, evangelical and mainstream, and we are very supportive of the work that Wheeler has already done in this community in the past 2 years since they've moved to Bloomington. We think this expansion of the facility to 130, to an occupancy of 130 is very important for this reason. It allows us for the first time in this community to have emergency sheltering under the same roof as recovery services. Up to this point, where we've had emergency sheltering, yes, we've been able to provide beds for a night, but have not had a direct linkage then from that emergency sheltering to recovery services. The Wheeler model is a low barrier shelter on the front end so that anybody who needs a bed is welcomed in to have a warm, safe place, especially on a winter's night, as long as a few very basic rules are adhered to. But with the increase in occupancy, we then have an opportunity for these guests to have direct access to recovery services right there in the same facility. Access to caseworkers, access to a variety of programs, and if a Wheeler program is not the best fit, then referral to some other recovery program in the city of Bloomington. We are not going to get on top of our homeless situation. We're not going to get on top of our drug abuse situation in this town unless we're finally able to direct the folks on the streets, direct the folks who are abusing drugs and alcohol to the services that they need. If the current Wheeler facility is expanded to the proposed occupancy level, we believe that we can begin finally to make those direct connections and finally make some progress in terms of our ongoing issues with homelessness and with drug abuse. So thank you all for considering this.
Thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Please state your name.
Bob Bland?
Do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yep, up to 5 minutes.
Okay. I own the building right along 3rd Street where like Roly Poly and Pizza X. Oh, sorry. So the problems I've had with the people from the Wheeler Missions is, you know, I think they're doing great work to start with at Wheeler Missions, and I've donated in the past, so I'm not totally against what they're doing, but the problem I have is with the people that are coming there. They loiter in front of my building all the time, take the tables and things from Roly Poly Restaurant and leave their trash, and the people that work at Pizza X are there till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. They're scared of some of the people that's coming and going. I put in some extra security lights outside, and I'm afraid if we go from 50 to 130, the problems are going to be that much worse. I mean, it's going to be over twice as bad. And even as a petitioner said, there's drug use and there's problems with them loitering on the businesses on Kirkwood. So why wouldn't it be just that much worse for the businesses around there? And so I don't think it's fair to dump all the same problems that we're trying to get off Kirkwood on the other businesses on this side of town. So, and the building's an awful small building also for 130 people. You know, the apartment building you just looked at previously for 48 people, 49 people was a 3-story huge building, and this is a building probably a third of the size with 130 people in it. That seems like a little bit excessive. But I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that would like to comment? Please state your name.
My name is Alan Backler.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I can't hear you.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You have up to 5 minutes, sir.
Okay. I am the president of the Interfaith Emergency Winter Shelter, and I just want to make one point, and that is that when the capacity of the building is raised to 130, it's not 130 guests. It's 130, including the staff and the volunteers. So the number of increased guests is not anywhere near the doubling or tripling that the numbers look like. And therefore, I do not see that that problem was going to be increased substantially. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public? Please state your name.
Helen Hempfling.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
I am pastor at First Christian Church, which has served as one of the interfaith shelter sites since its inception in 2009. I was on the original Interfaith Winter Shelter Board and chaired it, so I've been around for a while. Also, Backstreet Mission with Kelly was 1996, because at that point I was director of the Shelter Inc. So just, if you want that for your facts. We are very much supportive of the Wheeler Ministries' endeavor to have the Interfaith Winter Shelter housed at their place. When we began in 2009, we set up for the fact that we didn't want to see people freezing. And we also set up for the reason the Interfaith Winter Shelter to be a stopgap measure until other solutions, collaborative solutions, were found. And in the years since then, we believe that some collaborative solutions have been found with Wheeler's partnership. As you know, all these years later, we do still have a problem, and we feel like Wheeler is best suited for this community to help address some of the problems that our community faces. We support them for a number of reasons, and here's a few of them. This is what they do. This is what they do at their core. They know what they're doing, and the church buildings, we have been doing it, but that's not, we do a lot of other things too, and our spaces and our buildings are used for other reasons too. And so to have one building dedicated to this endeavor will serve the people experiencing homelessness that we are right now doing our best to serve, but maybe not as well as we possibly could be. We also trust that they will use the same model that the Interfaith Winter Shelter currently uses, which is to treat people with respect, with dignity, low barrier, asking them to behave with certain standards while they are here. We've had, at the churches, we've had, we're right on Kirkwood Avenue, so you're aware of some of the Kirkwood issues we faced. We have had issues not unlike you've heard about, but we've also had lots of really, really good experiences serving those who are experiencing homelessness, and seen lots of successes too, and it's really heartwarming to see those things happen. We do feel like one site works a lot better than having 4 different sites and having people have to figure out, traipse around where to go, how to get there, and those sorts of things. And we are ready to partner fully with Wheeler and the Interfaith Shelter Board. We don't have the same capacity, the churches, the same capacities that the Wheeler will be able to have once, hopefully, that you're able to approve this request. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Any final comments from the petitioner?
Yeah, I would like to say, just out of respect for our neighbors, we've had some really wonderful neighbors, and Chris is one of them, who's been really gracious in the work that we're doing and understanding, and that's a tough situation, I think, for any business owner that's close to a homeless shelter. And so one of our objectives, I think, with the partnership with the Interfaith Winter Shelter is to increase our volunteer base. And so our goal temporarily will be to try to police those areas better and supervise them better, offer some cleanup services to our neighbors. But ultimately, Wheeler's goal is going to be to get out of that facility and to expand into a larger footprint with more green space, more capacity, just a better situation overall. So as we raise the money, and we've been looking for real estate, I think now for two years, and have several things in the works. So that's our ultimate goal, is to try to because we want to benefit our neighbors as well. Part of, our goal in helping homeless and those addicted, that's, our primary focus, but we also want to just benefit Bloomington in general, and that includes the students, the business owners, the community, and our neighbors. And so we definitely respect what you guys have done and see the burden that it is on you as well. So just wanted to acknowledge that and speak to it. Thank you.
Thank you. And as we go back to the board, I think Joe has a question.
I just had a question for staff. One of the issues that was raised that seemed kind of pertinent was this issue of lighting, particularly in the street, with people who, probably, they're not driving to this facility. A lot of people are getting there on their, walking or whatever. And what are the prospects, either for the city or for the petitioner or for somehow to address the question of lighting?
Sure, great question. So the petitioner could certainly install some lights along the edge of the property that would light up the parking lot, light up parts of the streets. Beyond that, it would be the responsibility of the city. I don't have access to those budgets or priorities. The Public Works Department installs lights and pays for electricity, but we can certainly talk with them about the issues raised tonight and see how that fits in with their fiscal plans.
I would certainly encourage that. I mean, it does take a village in a context like this, so the city would be well advised, I think, to step up and help out. Appreciate that.
Question, is there a sidewalk from Third up past the development along Third?
Let me check.
Yeah, there is one on the west side. It's just it's not on the photograph, it's on the other side of the street.
The sidewalk is actually directly.
I'm sorry, that was a question for staff.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What I don't have the answer though, and I believe he does.
Would you defer then?
I will defer. Yes.
Okay, please just answer only the question.
Yes, there's a sidewalk that runs right along West 3rd Street, and so the picture that you have in front of you now shows the street coming up, that's Westplex Ave, and that does not have a sidewalk, and that is a problem. So
Thank
people
you.
are.
That's
Yep.
where we're getting the comment part. I'm sorry. Any other questions? Okay, and back to the board for action.
Okay. I will move approval of CU-24-17 conditional use approval based on the findings that are set forth in the staff report and with the conditions of approval that are in the staff report.
I'll second that.
Any comments?
I will just underscore my earlier comment that I think the city has some obligation to step up and help out in this situation.
Carmen?
Clapper,
Yes.
Stuart Goliath, Aquila,
Yes.
Hoffman.
Yes.
Motion passes, petition is granted, and we are adjourned.